A new dawn on Behind the Headlines with me, Timothy Nyangweso. Every Wednesday, live in our studios in the heart of Kampala, we have conversations that have analysis, explanation, but not every truth is fact, and not every fact is truth. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Good evening and welcome to your public broadcaster. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. A lot to discuss in the last few days, but today we'll focus on a proposal to have Uganda Commercial Bank revived. What does that mean? In 1965, it was called Uganda Saving and Credit Limited. In 1971, it was nationalized. But we also see that it had the highest number of branches, over 190, more than 60 billion in debt. Some of the problems it had was mismanagement, bad loans, and that's where we saw a gentleman step in and put it in order. Pressures from IMF and the World Bank made it sold in 2001, 2002. What does that mean for our economy? Can the revival of this commercial bank unlock our economy? The biggest questions we have: what impact will it have? What significance will it have on the economy? Will it deal with unemployment? Very many questions, very few answers. But the panel we have today has a combined economic energy or muscle of 160 years at that. Let's meet our panel tonight.
Distinguished scholar and statesman, Professor Suruma served as the Minister of Finance. He was internationally recognized for his outstanding service when he won the award of Africa's Best Minister of the year 2008. Professor Suruma has been at the center of objective interactions and negotiations with numerous financial institutions such as the IMF, World Bank, African Development Bank, China Development Bank, among others. Dr. Fred Muhumuza, Director of the Economic Forum at Makerere University Business School. Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, an accountant by profession, currently representing the people of Butambala County in Parliament. Honorable Omara Paul, an economist, former banker, and now a politician representing the people of Otuke County. Professor Sarah Sali, the Dean of the School of Gender and Women's Studies at Makerere University, our esteemed expert and the only female guest on the panel. Keep it at your public broadcaster on Behind the Headlines for empowerment and inspiration. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
So you have met the panel and you see how distinguished they are. A lot of wealth in economics there, but also we're cognizant of the two major topics that are developing, especially the fractures within the FDC and also the protests that are happening in Kenya as we speak. Today was day one, 2 days to go. But the most critical issue is the economy of this country. Where is it going? What silver bullets do we need to have to safeguard it? My name is Timothy Nyangweso, and this is Behind the Headlines. So tonight I have a lady and gentleman on the panel, and we're going to be discussing all these things. You can be part of the conversation here on 0709 60 92 25 and let us know what you think. Or our YouTube channel, get there and watch us. Hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. You can also tweet. Dr. Sarah, Professor Sarah, it's good to have you. I know the joke we're having earlier on. We'll get to that later on. Dr. Muhumuza, it's a pleasure meeting you. And Honorable Mara, it's always a pleasure having you. But it is in order that we start with Professor Suruma Ezra, who is with us here. Being that Uganda Commercial Bank, with all the antagonism you had when you were Deputy Governor, decided to move there as both Chairman and Managing Director of Uganda Commercial Bank, turned it upside down, right side up, I should say. Give us the historical context of this and if this proposal by government is the silver bullet.
I'm not clear. What do you want me to do?
I want you to give us the historical context of Uganda Commercial Bank, where you found it, how you changed it, it got sold, then what happens next?
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening to all our viewers. It's a privilege to be here tonight. I came to the Bank of Uganda as Director of Research in February 1987. And we were just beginning to negotiate with the World Bank and IMF for a credit to Uganda because our economy was in a very, very poor state. Our shops were empty. There was no petrol. There was no, the roads were impassable. And there was a shortage of everything. We were lining up for virtually every commodity. So the economy was in a very, very poor state. So the money was worthless. We used to carry the money in bags, and we bring the goods in our pockets, to quote an example from Germany. So you had to carry a bag of money. You had to carry a bag of money. So the need for financial reform was clear. And so in 1987, we decided that we should withdraw all that money, take away 3 zeros from the money. So if you have 1,000, now you have 1 shilling, and then take away 30% of that, so to reduce the quantity of money which was in circulation and attempting to increase its use. This was part of a general effort of financial sector reform. Now later on, the IMF and World Bank came. They brought a very large delegation, I remember, of 19 people to the central bank, the largest delegation I had ever seen. They are more than us Ugandans. And they had come to carry out a financial sector reform. And they did go around, visited all the banks. They came back and said, Uganda Commercial Bank was in a very bad shape, was insolvent, meaning it's not making any money. Actually, it was also not liquid. They didn't have money to give to depositors. They said Uganda Cooperative Bank was also in a very bad state. They said Uganda Development Bank was in a bad state. Not all these are government banks, government-owned banks. And so later on, they said we are going to bring consultants to do what they call diagnostic studies. And they did. They published the reports. The reports were saying these banks should be either should be stopped, or should be liquidated, or they should be sold. But specifically with Uganda Commercial Bank, they didn't say it should be liquidated, but they said it needed to be worked on. It was not until later, in the year or so, when we actually wanted a loan of $100 million in order to boost our balance of payments, that they gave us a package with conditionalities. Many people are only reading the top page, which said we'll give you $100 million. But below was a condition that should be privatized, which I rejected. And I told my minister at that time, Honorable Mayanja Kanji, that I thought it was a very bad idea for us to lose our bank because we wanted to borrow this money. But the delegation was a very big delegation in Washington. My governor, Konyogo, he's also rest in peace. Honorable Mutebile, same, rest in peace. Last PSST who passed on. All these were all there. Mukith Makanzi. They said, but we can't go back without the money. How are we going to face the president and say we are not able to get the money? So Honorable Mayanjan Kanji, rest in peace, said, we better go on. So for me, when I came back, I said, if the problem is that UCB is insolvent and not liquid, allow me to go there and rectify this problem. And the president allowed me, and Mayanjan Kanji said, but Musawar Wachogenda, to be allowed, no vera governor. I said, let me go and clear this problem. So I left. I was deputy governor at that time. And it was a very, very hard battle. I didn't realize I was putting my life in danger until some friends came, but you man, do you want to stay here? Or are you planning to go away? Because you can't keep on, you can't dismiss 1,000 people and think you'll stay in Uganda. Some of the big people who had borrowed more than $100 million, 100 million shillings from that, I said, let them go and manage that money. How do you borrow 100 million and then you stay here working full time for UCB? Out. To cut a long story short, we restructured the bank, we made it profitable. Again, it's important to remind Ugandans that Uganda Commercial Bank, from its formation by law in 1965 until 1978, it was a profitable bank throughout all that period. In 1979, during the Amin War, they bombed its branch in Masaka. And so they had to write it off. So that year they made a loss. But thereafter, until 1987, again they were making profits. So it was a profitable bank. Let there be no doubt about that. UCB was a profitable enterprise. So, but the problem came when the new manager, late Frank Mwine, was, I believe, instructed or encouraged to increase the number of branches so that the bank would provide services to the whole country. So he increased the branches from 60 to 189. But the government did not put in an additional penny of capital. So where did he get the money to increase these branches? Because you have to put up buildings, you have to buy equipment, you have many things are needed to open a branch. And we estimated at that time that it took about 3 years for a branch to become profitable. So the bank was not making money anymore. It was failing because it had, first of all, it had opened all these branches when it didn't have the money to do so, and had used depositors' money. So when depositors came for their money, the money was not there. This was the problem. So we solved this this problem. I went there in 1993. By 1996, I had solved the problem. So I was dismissed. I had finished my work. And
thank you very much, Professor.
I left.
Let me come to
just a long question, so I had to give you.
And I'm grateful because that builds context of where we're going. Especially, we have to know where we're coming from to know where we're going. Honorable Mara, before I come to Professor Sarah, he has spoken of the history of Uganda Commercial Bank. And before we got on, my question to you was cooperatives and commercial banks. Yeah. Your thoughts on that?
First of all, I want to appreciate the panelists, and more specifically Professor Suruma for accepting to be here and giving us insight into the unknown about Uganda Commercial Bank. Now we know that, in fact, UCB was profitable by the time it was sold. And I'm told that the issue of insolvency was put aside in abeyance. So when now it was profitable, I said, oh, it will now earn a higher price because now it's profitable. That is what he was told. But relating to your question, UCB and Cooperative Bank, if you look at all the economies worldwide, there is no nation that across the world that would develop without mobilizing domestic savings. In fact, UCB was indeed a quintessential strong pride of the nation, which was basically a symbol of financial stability and financial independence, because it provided the savers to pool their monies together and for the borrowers to have access to affordable credit. Because imagine Ugandans pooling all the resources together. The same thing with the Cooperative Bank. And Cooperative Bank were basically put together by cooperators across the country. These were unions, these were cooperative societies and individuals that came together, again, in the spirit of putting together some savings for onward lending. So as a country, I think by privatizing Uganda Commercial Bank and allowing the Cooperative Bank to collapse was basically a big strategic mistake that we made as a country. And I will later on show you statistics. I've done some analysis of the 10 top banks of this country. Only 2 are national, Ugandan-based. That is Centenary Rural Development Bank and Housing Finance Bank. The rest are foreign banks. And in terms of the asset composition, they are basically controlling 80% of those total assets compared to the locals. So I want to appreciate and thank Flavian and Michael Mugabe, both managing directors of Centenary Development Bank and Housing Finance Bank, to become amongst the top 10. But otherwise, this country does not have a local bank, because at the end of the day, our what is presumed as domestic savings is basically foreign owned. And when time comes, the dividend payout policy will determine how money will eventually be externalized out of the country. And so therefore, the benefit to the nation is there, yes, but it's only us, by the way, within the region who sold our own national bank. Kenya has KCB, which is basically extended itself here. Tanzania's bank is there. Malawi, I worked there. They have the regional commercial bank. And so therefore, to answer your question more directly, is that we need to have a hard look into revisiting the reestablishment of the Uganda Commercial Bank and the Uganda Cooperative Bank, okay, to put us in a much better position, again, to retain, actually rediscover our financial independence and then begin to provide money for the country.
Okay, thank you very much. Professor Sarah, hearing from Professor Suruma and hearing from Honorable Mara, and also looking at the concept of Kenya having KCB, Equity Bank, and the Kenya Cooperative Bank, did we make a mistake in liberalizing the banking sector, but also this privatization animal? Give us perspective.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, our viewers. Yes, we've heard from the 2 expert bankers, and they have spoken well as bankers. I think Professor Suruma has given us a detailed history of why the bank had to be privatized from a very good and a very strong economic base. But I think economics is not all that the bank was about. I tried to do some reading of the history of this bank and how banking systems emerged in Uganda during the time of colonialism, of course set through colonialism. The 1920s have all these three big banks, Barclays, the Grindleys, Standard, and all that. And even at that time, Ugandan farmers felt left out. The momentum peaks a lot in the 1940s. And the Ugandan farmers organized themselves into a cooperative. So that showed that actually, even as early as that time, they had been excluded. Of course, finally, it gets into what you said earlier, the cooperative entity that it was in 1961, which finally becomes UCB in 1965, according to the Act of Parliament. But I think it's important to know why was it formed. And the whole aspect of feeling excluded, African farmers not having access to banking services, and not having access to formal bank, but also not having access to credit to work with. So all these kinds of things were such a challenge to that. And of course, later on, we see it being the history that Professor Suruma has given us, how it then becomes profitable, and then how it suffers the challenges that it suffers. And I think the whole issue is maybe after independence, the whole history and outlook to the bank is really in economic terms. But we seem to have forgotten one of the key pillars for which it was formed. And maybe which Honorable Mara has touched about, that you cannot have national development without a national bank. When you look at most of the development strategies in Uganda at the time from independence, they were all talking about, very much like we do today, poverty reduction, and they focus on most of our population being rural, okay? And maybe this drove the expansion of the bank into rural areas because the economy was largely rural. The economy was largely cash crop based. So fast forward, when we talk about its being insolvent, when we talk about its not having liquidity, and indeed for us, we were still students then with Honorable Mara, but at least what you read in the literature, it was not solvent, there was a lot of corruption, there was state interference, the whole list of reasons the bank gave why the UCB had to be privatized. And like Professor Suruma has said, it couldn't be closed because it had a wide reach. It was all over the place, so it would have challenges of closing like all the others. Those that were closed. But they came up with a way of reorganizing it, and the argument that it was now more profitable because it was going to fetch more. But the issue is, even fast forward, when they assess how well privatization had worked, around 2005, the literature which comes out is really not based on its reach to the people, but it is based on its liquidity according to the performance of the bank that had bought it. Of course, 80% went to the Standard of South Africa, and then the 20% together form Stanbic. So what you get as an evaluation of the successful privatization of UCB is unfortunately a story of how well Stanbic performs. Of course, they talk about they had solved the insolvency problem. They were documenting more returns on investments, on assets of Stanbic. They were talking about how there was some commitment to the rural poor, particularly to the agriculture sector. But when you compare that with what is happening, you wonder which actually part of the agriculture sector. So it was not assessed on how well its reach on its initial mission was, because this is not just a bank which came to do financial services. It had a spirit beyond the financial services. And fast forward, when you look at things today, you look at the number of microfinance things that have come up, how people are being ripped off, how you find even in the most rural areas, there are money lenders that are taking people's names so as to lend them money. When you read stories in the papers on how people to access PDM have to travel so many kilometers, sleep in an urban area for 3 days, and be asked things that they don't know, like collateral, like titles which they don't have, you make it makes me wonder whether beyond looking at the economics, we should also not have paid attention to the kind of economy, to the kind of people. Because if we don't do that, you can always have this kind of paradox where you have economic growth with a malfunctioning society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mumza, I watched a few clips with my predecessor when you were here, and you called to Ugandans to tighten their belts. When you look at our economic climate and look at this banking sector, is this proposal viable?
It's not, sadly, or gladly, because of the environment that we are in. And I'm still trying to listen in to connect the dots. This is really the headline. So I'm still trying to understand what is the story behind the headlines so that I can fit into this conversation. If reviving Uganda Commercial Bank is the answer, what was the question? To begin with, government already has banks it owns. Post Bank is 100% owned by government. As they have mentioned, Uganda Development Bank is available if you want to look at that other constituency. But also government is a major shareholder in Housing Finance Bank. So it already has banks that it owns. So why this? Why don't we strengthen those if we really want a government role? And I really worked with Professor Suruma to bring back Post Bank, because Post Bank was also listed under the privatization statute for, I think, partial or total privatization. But when we were beginning the sub-county development model, Prosperity for All, in the early 2000s, Professor Suruma and General Sari felt we needed a government bank to pursue some of these initiatives. And one of my tasks was to do the donkey work as they do the political cover and the rest of whatever conversations were needed to bring back Post Bank from the category of being classified to 100% being retained and owned by the government. So we went through parliamentary changes of that, and we succeeded. Now, the challenge that came through was capitalization. Of course, now the regulation is very, very stringent, and we shouldn't forget that. The regulation at that point, the Ministry of Finance would license banks and hand them over for the central bank to manage. And some of the banks they would license would really be very problematic to manage, politically and financially. So the debate we had to convince the central bank to bring back Post Bank as a government owned by one entity, because that was in the law after the history of Ugandan-owned banks failing, partly because of weak capitalization, but also they had the challenge of governance. And I'm glad that has come through. That out of nowhere, UCB decided I must open so many branches. And not using equity. Because remember, branches are not for shareholder, for depositors' funds. Use your own equity. Now that was already the first mistake. So we had those issues that the decisions being made in these government-owned entities were not following the business of banking. So they had that challenge. Now we had to convince the central bank to say, can we have one bank that is 100% owned? The law required that that owner must be a solid owner. And we really said, don't you think the government is? Professor Mutebira and his team said, fine, you bring the capital. Now we had to work with Professor Suruma to find capital to capitalize that bank. And the reason I'm saying this is because, again, we are back in that space. The Bank of Uganda and regulation by the minister has come through that all commercial banks, category tier 1, must have minimum capital of 150 billion by end of June next year. A number of banks have moved there, a number of banks are still progressing. So already we are in that situation where government already on its existing banks needs to inject new capital. So to think of starting a new entity where you already have other actors, you may also want to check with the law whether one shareholder can be allowed to own two banks in the same market, because already we own these other banks. So there are a number of things to think about. That's why I'm saying if this is the answer, what was the problem? And we need to get to that space. The governance issue, now that one I think wouldn't be a big threat, because now the whole board of directors and senior managers in the banking sector, the Bank of Uganda must give an objection.
And you said, what is the question? One of the things in this proposal is actually the interest rate, the runaway interest rate.
Yes.
It's one of the things embedded in this proposal. So
Now,
that is the question. What is the answer?
Exactly. Because what is driving the interest rates? And let me ask our teams here to show us my first slide. I have some slides here. I went back and dug the interest rate story. Look at those slides. All the way from 1983. You see a big spike there, which is towards the 90s. It's a little bit far. But what is interesting in that spike, the figures you see up are the deposit mobilization rates, the rediscount rate, and the bank rate if you go to borrow from the central bank, savings rates, if you are following where you're tracking depositors, because that was the feeling that people have money but the saving rates are so low. If you give them higher saving rate, they will bring their money to the banks. And that's why I think they let Mwine spread out branches to help people bring the money, which was assumed to be under their mattresses. So go nearer to them, pick it out, but also give them a good rate. Now the unfortunate part was the lending rate was lower than the mobilization rate. Now that's the market distortion that the IMF, and not necessarily IMF, this is basic economics. Anybody would have done it. Sometimes I want to separate the doctor from the medicine. Because IMF was the doctor, but what the medicine was economics. So I want an ideological argument based on the economics, not necessarily to say the IMF said, but what was the economics? You cannot borrow at 15% and lend at 8%. You won't be viable. And once that conversation continues, and that's why that was the discussion at the time when you see those spikes. Now later on, after the closure of UCB, because it was a dominant player in the market, and the liberalization, now the other banks which mind about business, to say I cannot lend less than what it has cost me to mobilize the resources, came in, and you now begin to see the lending rate going above the deposit mobilization rates. Now, why are these rates up? That's the question you want to ask, because UCB won't solve it. The rates are up because of some structural issues, some of them because of government, and that's why at that point they were also telling government, scale down your spending, retrench, demobilize, privatize, all these things that are guzzling your resources and forcing you to go on the market to borrow and driving rates higher must stop. We are back in that situation. The other slides you have there, you'll find that the daily rate, these are banks that really don't have liquidity. And there are many in this market. Who would go to a big bank to say, give me some money for a week? Now, you are borrowing $1 billion for a week. The rate is 10%. After a week, you must bring my $1 billion and 100 million. Overnight borrowing is also 9 to 10%. Now, what is driving those rates? UCB won't solve that. It's a structural issue. Government itself is borrowing heavily in this market, and the key player.
Let me come to you. Let him finish.
It's a key player. So I'm trying to address the economics, then we can have the discussion. Because I think it's the economics that is the story behind the headlines.
Okay.
The rest might be politics, it might be ideology, emotionalism, and what I must own. But what is the economics? Until you fix that, your rates will not come down.
Honorable Mara, before I come to Honorable Chivumbi.
Yeah, I think Dr. Bumuza's argument is totally misleading.
It's economics, not mine.
He's talking about interest rates. I don't think the re-establishment of UCB and Cooperative Bank is in the main interest rates. It is not. It is about ownership of our financial system and our own savings. If you look at the argument he's making, is talking about Postbank. Postbank in the scheme of things is nowhere. Yes. I have just given you a quick, let me give you a quick data, and I wish I had uploaded it up there. If you look at the 10 topmost banks, those 10 topmost banks control more than 90% or even 95% of the total industry numbers, whether it is deposits, whether it's assets, whether it's profitability. Now, let me give you a quick one. So you find, for example, I've given you about the total assets of the bank. Let me give you the numbers.
Actually, 5 banks control 75%.
Exactly. So total assets almost 40 trillion. Yeah. Now, 80% of those total assets are foreign owned, and only 20% out of these top 10 that I've done. Then net loans and advances, 15.7 trillion. Again, foreign banks own 77% of those loans.
I don't know what you mean by foreign banks.
No, let me. Foreign owned. Owned.
That's a different thing.
Now, foreign owned. Then customer deposits. These are now customers, us who are banking.
Yes.
Now, we have 25970 number of customers. Now, 81% of those customers, they bank with foreign-owned banks.
Why?
And we are going to come to the game. The profit of 1.1 trillion, 1.146 trillion of these top 10 banks, okay, 73% of that profit goes to the foreign-owned banks, and only 27% is retained here. Now, so the argument I'm making is that our investment in UCB is actually an investment where we are expecting a return. That money will go towards our consolidated fund. We want those earnings, whether it is us who are depositors, whether it's government institutions that are banking, they should bank with Uganda Commercial Bank. At the moment, your post bank is not able to attract any of these big customers to bank with it.
Why?
Because of branding, that's one thing. Secondly, you mentioned it, capital. If you look at, for example, the core capital ratio, which is required by the central bank, is 12.5%. Now, if you look at these big banks, they are doubling more than that, which is basically, what it means is basically that your core capital to risk-weighted assets ratio must actually go up. And your ability to, for example, fund big businesses. For example, if Nairobi says we want to put a new brewing machines costing about $20 million or whatever, because of your core capital is very small.
Okay.
You cannot bank that kind of deal. So you remain a post bank in the corner there,
and
a fifth columnist.
Core capital is a function of the shareholders' ability.
Okay, gentlemen.
And also,
let me bring
the government of Uganda.
And the size of the balance sheet as well. Size of the balance sheet.
Exactly.
Let me bring in Honorable Chivumbi, both as the Shadow Minister and Member of Parliament representing the people of Butambala. Honorable, hearing this proposal by government to revive Uganda Commercial Bank, whichever name they choose to give it, hearing the economics from Dr. Mhumza, but also hearing the sentiments and also the desire to have a financial institution by Honorable Omara. What are your thoughts on this?
I apologize for coming a little late, but I was all the way from CBS to here, and I had to catch a bit of some small dinner.
We shall give you a lead car next time.
Sometimes it's a big calling, but I'm also humbled to meet Dr. Suruma. I've been reading a lot about him, and I use a little bit of his literature on many things. They're so sorry to be amidst him. And Dr. Mhumza, I've been with him in many spaces.
Yes. The moderator strategically put you there. So
that we don't... when they brought me the topic, the two, unlocking economic potential, and then reviving
Uganda Commercial Bank.
It was like assuming that to unlock our economic potential, we've got to bring back
Uganda
UCB.
Commercial Bank.
I don't agree that to unlock our economic potential as a country, the low-hanging fruit is to bring back UCB. For reasons being advanced by Mr. Omara, and I've listened to Dr. Suruma here and Dr. Sarah, it's fairly sentimental and patriotic and good music for the ear, but the question is it the right economics? Incidentally, if I'm to tackle the first one, to unlock our economic potential today is largely to do a lot of structural reforms in our governance structure, in our own expenditure systems. Me and Omar have been looking at the figures where we spend our money, and I've been doing some research on the domestic borrowing, who takes the money for domestic borrowing. Most of the money that we take for domestic borrowing for the last 4 years have been going towards defense expenditure. Most of the money, because domestic defense spending cannot easily be financed by external borrowing.
Not even easily. Should not.
So most of our expenditure, borrowing, the major drive is to meet our defense
needs
and security needs. Is bringing back commercial bank, will it address that driver? Because that's the number one. When you talk about interest rates, the argument I've had here about interest rates is that because government is also a big player in the domestic market in terms of borrowing. The question is, why is government borrowing? To do what? So most of the borrowing of government domestically is to do recurrent expenditure. Not even the development, by the way. Is to meet our recurrent deficit. Therefore, the question is, if you want to unlock the economy of Uganda potential, is you look at the big drivers of that. The answer, I think, bringing back Uganda Commercial Bank would be quite below the answer. Secondly, in my humble view, and the major question, what is not being answered, and at a very strategic level, and we are gambling. You are bringing back Uganda Airlines, you are bringing back this, we are merging this. The question is, what is going to be the role of government in the economic growth and the development of Uganda? The moment, how is government going to play? Are we going to, is government going back to business of owning businesses and running businesses? Because itself is a bad behaving entity as government from all intent and purposes. We've been growing it big, we've been spending all this money. When you look at the number, they will alarm you. Dr. Mumza knows how we are spending our money. So, is this the very entity we want to take and run a business? You have UDC, you have the Uganda Development Bank. How is it playing it? Even when you talk about housing finance and post bank, if I walked to housing finance and I bank with them, do I go to a government bank? What difference does it provide to me, a consumer, than when I walk to Stanbic Bank? Let me be specific. Actually, to tell you the truth, it is sometimes cheaper to go for commercial, non-government banks. So the days of Dr. Suruma, when people used to walk to UCB and feel they've walked home, are long gone. Are the interest rates of housing finance, where we've been pumping money, any different from Standard Chart or any other, or the top four? The answer is no. Will you bring back commercial bank and don't put it at the same footing as other banks? The answer is no. Therefore, for me, I think if we want to engage the debate on how to revive our economic potential, is to answer the two big questions. The structure of our government and how we are spending our money. Because today, look at the budget. Human capital development, I think it's going to take, is it
9.1 trillion?
9.1 trillion. But bulk of the 9.1 trillion is going to pay for wage in health and education. Nothing more. Then the second tier is governance and security. Now, governance and security is number 2, simply because 1, we exclude the legislature and we exclude the judiciary in governance and security. If we were to put the legislature and the judiciary, governance and security will be number 1 of first call on our budget. The second thing today, when you go below that, is we are paying for our, because 5 trillion will go to 6 trillion are going to go towards interest payments. So the question is, where are you borrowing? Where in all that debate do you press UCB? In all that debate, where do you press UCB? You've grown your legislature to 500 and something without a space where they can sit. One day we had a debate with Dr. Muhumuza. You've adopted a policy. You are saying they put branches. You have adopted a policy of building a secondary school in every sub-county, in a district where there are 2 first grades. But you want to build a secondary school in a district where you only got 2 first grades.
At P7.
In P7. And that district has got 27 sub-counties. With the 2 first grades, you are going to build 27 senior secondary schools in that district. Now, where in that debate do you press the revival of UCB?
Funding. Funding your budget.
I agree with those who are pushing an argument is that you've got to collect your own domestic and own it.
Yes.
The question is, must you Ugandans be the best mobilizer? I hear Mr. Omara saying, you see, you do capital flight, blah, blah. Now, you make also study what it will take to make UCB, if you are to revive it, to be a leading bank. Will it take for it to offer better services, better interest rates, better everything, and will that survive in the market? Now, you want to copy the example of Kenya. Kenya is paying dividends for decisions Moi took. Daniel Arap Moi resisted outright liberalization. While in Uganda, you went blindly into it, 100%. Because where on earth would you have capitalized? Where on earth would you have would you have privatized a development bank, a cooperative bank?
Okay.
So, in my humble view, when you want to copy the examples of Kenya,
Yes.
first own up big on your wrong decisions you took in the late 80s and the early 90s.
Isn't that why they are rethinking?
Now, when you are going to rethink, don't do half answers. Rethink the whole question, and then you'll be home and dry.
Timothy, sorry, I need to give space to Professor. But when my colleagues talk the way he's talking, and he has already made a point that the military expenditure is taking a lot of money, and most of the money is coming from domestic borrowing. Now, domestic borrowing is basically treasury bills and bonds. And where are you getting the money from? The money as I've demonstrated to you here, is largely foreign-owned banks.
Yeah.
Now, so what is wrong? What is wrong by Ugandans re-establishing Uganda Commercial Bank? Make it #1 biggest commercial bank. This is what I'm talking about.
They have no money.
So which no money? If we can give, for example, how much did we give to Rocco? 250 billion shillings. How much did we
Which
give
we
to,
borrowed from abroad.
just a minute.
No, Honorable, let's be realistic.
No, please listen. How much did we give to Atiak? 270.
We have pumped 5.
270.
Now 600.
It's now over 600 billion.
Yeah.
Lower hospital.
How much money have we just thrown away there to individuals? So what is wrong by getting 150 billion shillings as core capital to basically restart UCB? And I would agree with you, we can look at Postbank, for example, and rebrand it. And basically what we are taking would be taking our branches, which is basically building, we rebrand it, we give it enough core capital. And then, for example, we said all government entities should bank with the UCB. At the moment, if you look at the numbers of the deposits which these banks have, it's basically money coming from government. So if that money now moves, let me say 4 trillion, 5 trillion has moved to UCB, then it means now if government now wants money, government can get that money from UCB.
That's
and then that interest is our own money, it stays here.
Honorable Mara, just a minute for
Those
Dr.
are-
Mumza.
those are
Then I
things
go
that we
to
must do.
Professor.
Just a minute. I have already indicated here.
Yes.
We issued a 20-year bond, which went for 18.5%. Now you want to borrow from Stanbic and Stanchart at 18.5% to re-establish UCB. To lend at what rate?
No.
Because the money we are using, the money you're talking about, which you are giving out, we are borrowing from these other
Okay,
banks.
gentlemen.
Doctor, you're misleading.
It's not
gentlemen, let's
misleading.
Uganda Revenue
Honorable-
Authority, in this financial year which has ended, have collected 25.5
That
trillion. That is our own money. We
Yes.
can make a decision on it without borrowing from
It
anybody.
is unable to cover
And
your
then-
wages
and then provide
and your
provide
defense
for
expenditure.
So
Okay,
I've already mentioned.
gentlemen, let me
We
bring in
prioritize that
Professor.
for
No,
security,
I totally
wages.
disagree.
Dr. Mumza and Honorable
And
Mara,
interest
let me
payment.
come back to you.
I disagree.
You have no
Ezra.
money.
Thank you very
Respectfully.
much.
Yes.
I really, I wish to appeal to my brothers and sisters. Let's try to stick to the fundamentals.
Yes,
Exactly.
yes. I
Not
agree
the
with you.
emotions.
No fundamentals.
The fundamentals.
Yes.
We teach in the introduction to economics
Yes.
that in order to make a product
Yes.
or provide a service, you need, normally we talk about 3 traditional factors of production.
Yeah.
You need labor, you need land, you need capital. Now they are adding other things, but
Yeah.
those are the basic ones that we teach. And most people recognize that, yes, if I have land and I'm here, I am able-bodied, I need a hoe. If I don't have a hoe as capital, equipment, means to get equipment to work with, tools, I cannot produce anything. Now, 80% also of our GDP, of our national income, of our production of goods and services is in the private sector. It's not in government. The government produces a relatively small part of our total income as a country. So the question is, the private sector you're talking about, the farmers, the
Small and medium
motorbike, the
enterprise.
taxis, the people are, ordinary people are doing whatever they can to make a living. Do they have access?
Banking
Can
service.
they access capital?
No.
Exactly.
As a country, we know that our rate of saving is low. In my view, a big part of the reason why our saving rate is low is people don't have access to institutions in which they can confidently put their money and feel that their money is safe, their savings.
Yeah.
So they put under the mattress. I saw some recent statistics from UBOS. They're quite alarming. How people putting money in the roof or digging holes. And then, of course, the crime, people coming to steal that money. So we are a backward country as far as mobilization of savings is concerned. Now, one of my regrets, as I was closing those branches of Uganda Commercial Bank to make it profitable, later on I said, these branches were an expansion of the country's financial infrastructure.
Yeah.
Now, many of our people, even when I was going to school, I never heard of that term, financial infrastructure. You only talk about finance. But it only occurred to me later that as a country, we need not only physical infrastructure, roads and bridges and airports. We also need mechanisms for raising and keeping and managing capital.
Financial services.
What we're calling in financial inclusion.
Yes.
So a lot of our capital is not in the banking system, in the villages.
Exactly.
It's being kept in the pockets, it's being kept in the roof, God knows where it is. So, I believe that how do you start, these banks in Greenridge and Baron, whatever, they came in the 1920s, very long time ago, the colonial time. So how do you start a bank in 1965? Okay, it was a savings bank before that, from 1954. Now you make it a bank in 1965. By 1980 or whatever, it is the largest bank. It is having nearly half the deposits of the whole country.
Yes.
How does that happen? It means that they were accessing
Rural finance.
population that was previously not reached.
Exactly.
Or they are doing something that the other banks were not doing. I would like to persuade you, brothers and sisters, that our country is basically unbanked.
That is the truth.
We don't have institutions for putting our capital together, which then we can use, not in government, but the government, of course, will benefit when the private sector grows. But here we are talking about enabling our people to get better tools, to buy maize meals, to use a hand tractor instead of a hoe, and so on. I, with my colleagues, we started Ugaford. We borrowed $25,000 and started Ugaford as a non-profit entity to help the active poor. Just if you have one tray of tomatoes, you are active, but you are poor. Can we help you instead of one tray? You can have a bag of tomatoes. And we saw, very soon we had grown to 10 billion doing that. Meaning there was a high demand. I'm just giving an example. I'm not boasting.
No.
I'm giving an example. So, I'm saying that the fundamental problem we have, in my view, of inadequate capital, which is partly why also the government is borrowing, because there is no from outside.
Yeah.
Because anyway, that's another matter.
We stick with the fundamentals.
Yes, we want to
rethink the model.
When I lived in New York City as a student, undergraduate student, and I was working in the city, I observed that on every block there was a church and a bank. Every block, at least a church and a bank. I could not understand. But I think now I understand. I'm a religious man, I know you need God.
Yes.
But I also am an economist, I know you need capital.
Capital, yes.
And so I really find it unfortunate that a person in my village has to spend 10,000 shillings to go to town, to the district capital, in order to deposit his money or to withdraw his money.
Or to even access PDM cash.
Even to access PDM cash.
Yes. Yes.
So why don't we, and this is really what we should do. This PDM cash, this 100 million we are sending to every parish,
Yes.
should be going to a parish branch, bank branch.
Exactly.
You only need about 20 or 30 million to start to furnish a branch. Then but that is also part of the capital. Then the 70 million will be there as capital. But more importantly, the people, our people can now say, this is a bank, it's regulated by government, it is safe, I can put my money there and my money is safe. When we started UCB going to the up country, people would come today and put their money. Then tomorrow morning they would be at the door. I want my money back. Then you give it to them and say, oh, so the money is really there. Then they put it back in the bank. They just wanted to be sure that is it true that the money will be safe. So once people are convinced that their money is safe, this is an institution, you even put deposit guarantees.
Yes.
Up to so much money, you are sure that government will refund your money.
Yes.
They have the confidence. They start saving in this branch. Then we build infrastructure, financial infrastructure for our country.
Yes.
Our savings rate will go up. Our capital as a country, as a people, as a nation will go up.
Yes.
So that we can now borrow from this instead of waiting that USAID is going to bring aid or whoever. Where were they? We were waiting for God knows when LBT2 will go. And the money starts coming back. I think that I would like to persuade you and the whole country that we are overdue in building a financial infrastructure for this country. It is as critical,
as roads,
perhaps more critical than the roads.
And actually, Professor,
because if you have that money, you can build the roads, you can do many of the things that you need to do. But you don't have that capital. You are walking on one leg, and you're not going very far.
Okay, gentlemen and lady, I'm going to ask that we take a break. When we come back, we pick up this conversation. But also, as we discuss how to unlock this economy, when we come back, we'll discuss things in the area of, can this model change? Then the digital platforms that are there. Do we need financial inclusion of structures, or our phones can be able to access that? This and more after this break.
These days, our homes are no longer just the places we live. It's where we attend meetings, go to class, keep each other safe, and entertain ourselves. To do this smoothly, you need a reliable internet connection. Buy the MTN WakaNet router, which connects up to 32 devices and get a free 40 GB data bundle at only 149,000 shillings. Or buy the MTN WakaNet MiFi at only 75,000 shillings and enjoy a free 15 GB bundle to stream, study, work, and play on the go. Visit any MTN service center to buy the MTN WakaNet router or MiFi and enjoy the internet that does amazing things.
Juko.
Yo.
What you go? Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a poultry project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Are you tired of high fees and slow transfer time when sending money? Airtel Money is here to revolutionize the way you move your money. We have revised our rates back on ground. Sending money from Airtel to other networks in Uganda, East Africa, and to the rest of the world has never been more affordable. Dial *185# and start sending money. Switch to Airtel Money today and experience unbeatable rates and top-notch services for all your local and international money transfer needs. Airtel Money, instant, secure, borderless.
Ekinene kikino Jemisinde mu bunabyalo ejabagoberizi ba Kristo East African Christian Marathon jangu tuddukira wamu misinde gy'essaala gino nga 13 omwezi ogw'omunaana erugogo ku kisaawe kya hockey jangu okikirira abo mu makago mu misinde gy'essaala n'ekiruubirirwa ekirungi eky'okuzimba ekifo awanakwatirwanga amasimu ag'ettundutundu ly'obuvanjuba bwa Africa. Weetabe emisinde gino oddukire wamu n'omusumba wo abakulembeze b'ekitundu kyo abanakiikirira Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, DR Congo, South Sudan n'abawano mu Uganda. Jangu odduke ne Captain Mike Mukula agenda okukulemberamu abaddusi. Ddukirira enteekateeka eno ng'ogula omujozi muwonaddukira ku mitwalo 2, mitwalo 3 n'emitwalo 10 kuba enteekateeka z'emisinde nga gino zikyusa ensi. Okumanya ebisingawo kuba ku noti 781 885 noti 55. Emisinde gya East African Christian Marathon giwagiddwa UBC TV, Star TV ne Star FM emmunyenye y'eggwanga.
MTN Uganda ne Uganda waranji batusako manrane chikona tena tekobuseko season yakuna savu July kuma Mount Papa's Hall usasule kwa MTN mobile money usasule gumu chitundu MTN usasule nega 15 iga sistemu kagatano stamu enda munana hasha MTN ofune tiketi yokati wabula ku mulyango usasule emitwalo 2 yepe emitwalo 5 ate meza ya milioni 2 munana July koni no hotel mkono mwenda July Nikan Resort Elweza 15 July France Africa Jinja Abim July Maria Flema Saka Abim Mwenda July Afro Club Eka Sangati Ateyo Yonoku Yingina Mutualo Fujinidwa Musente Talent Africa Victoria University Suzu Property Consultants Pepsi Max Uganda Warranty Ne
MTN.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyango. So in the studio, I'm joined by Professor Sarah Sally. I'm joined by Dr. Fred Muhumza and Honorable Omara Paul. But a new guest also, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. And finally, our elder here, Professor Ezra Suruma, who is discussing everything here. Let me read some of the feedback coming through. Hello, Timothy and the panelists. I think the debate is being inconsiderate and being irrational to Uganda as always. We promote government to do business and all their trials fail. Lubowa Hospital, Kira Motors, vaccination by Ministry of Science, Uganda Airlines, fertilizer factories in Toro. Okay, Charles Chitamirike there. Another message that comes through saying, I'm enjoying the discussion which is taking us back to the revival of Uganda Airlines. I'm opposing this. Uganda needs economic independence like yesterday, order to achieve the real economic growth. Okay, thank you very much. One more so that we can be able to engage our conversation here. Good evening, Timothy and the panelists. Thank Professor Suruma for coming through and the background he has given about UCB. The private sector is quickly crumbling day in and day out. Local businesses are closing shop, not only murdering jobs, but also the narrowing and shrinking of the national tax base. More so, the government's appetite to squeeze the remaining plasma out of the businesses. finances and PDM. Thank you very much. Someone here says, Honorable Mara, I like his how he disputes and puts things together in the economics. He should be the Minister of Finance. Honorable Mara, over to you there. Lastly, Professor Ezra Suruma has nailed it well. Banking is toxic in Uganda. Okay. Professor Sarah, is there a problem with our model? Especially looking at the trajectory we're taking as a country, and how do we unlock this economy?
Yes. Thank you very much, Timothy. Indeed, the topic is about unlocking the economy. And it's good that I have economists, and I'm not one. I stopped at senior 6 doing economics. So that's how far my economics goes.
But that's why it
ends. I didn't do it at university. Took it to university. At university, I did political economy, which was not economics. You would say it's not political. So what I'm saying is, I remember in 2017, when the president was enthroning the current vice chancellor we have, he challenged the economists of Makerere to explain to him the economic model that sustains the Karamojong household, the pastoral household. And he requested to be invited for a debate. And his challenge and contest was that he had engaged with his national economists who told him how so few Ugandans were earning $1 a day because the majority were surviving on less than $1 a day. And his question was, there are many rural households who are surviving without that $1 a day. And there's a Karamojong household, or a pastoral household, not surviving with $1 a day. And his question was, what is the economic model which explains that, other than the other economics we know? And why am I raising this? It raises the whole issue of models and thinking and paradigms. It's true, of course, we inherited a colonial education system, and we do understand certain things, and these things are central to us as basic fundamentals. But sometimes they lock us from thinking what the alternatives can be. Now, you have a country or a continent which has remained rural and poor for a very long time, in spite of all the economic development models we have inherited. As I said, right from independence, they are talking about prosperity for all, they are talking about wealth creation, they are talking about social justice, and hence the school and the hospital in every parish, or by then it was every district in the 60s. So you've had all these things, and they have failed. They have not transformed us into as much wealth as we had wanted, to the extent that now those who own the economic models we work with have just branded Africa as a place where nothing works. However much you put money in, nothing works. So we go back to what I said. How do we rethink our equation? To go back to the issue of social inclusion, which was one of the reasons that brought about this bank in the 50s. We may not necessarily revive the bank and call it UCB. Maybe we are stuck in how that worked. But the point remains that we need to become financially inclusive or economically inclusive of the population, which is not in that. And one of the models I have always loved over the years is the model of the Grameen Bank. Muhammad Yunus, after his sojourns in foreign education systems, returned to Bangladesh as a banker and as an economist. And then he realized that the banks that were in Dhaka at the time, the Dhaka of Bangladesh, excluded a population which was very poor and therefore not bankable, but were engaging in finance. And these were market vendors, they were women selling vegetables, etc., etc. So he convinced the bank to pay attention to this. And that is what gave birth to the Grameen Bank. Up to today, the Grameen Bank's model is for the very poor people in Bangladesh. He has won a Nobel Peace Prize. Right now, the Grameen Bank, okay, up to 2016, was operating with revenue of $204 million US. It has remained for the very poor, not going into big things. But why did he go the Grameen way? Because he believed that this population needed to be included in the economy. He believed that this population was working hard. Actually, he starts with 5 women selling vegetables, giving them loans in the morning, and in the evening, they returned the money he gave them. As the days went on, they were returning the money, but expanding, keeping some, of course, making more profits, and expanding their stores. And they did expand, and some of these have become big business people. So he markets the Grameen model. Now, in Uganda, we do not have to do the Grameen model. But what is the model that works for us? Most of the people are very poor. Most of the people are on small holdings. Most of the people are agriculturalists, but I've always said here that other than the rural agricultures we are catering for in PDM, is a section of people, if you go down to the arcades, the tailoring group, the whatever, people are making so many things. They're like Asian sweatshops. You can go to a whole floor. Those ones are specialized in suits. Those ones are specialized in coats. Those ones are making dresses. You can go and organize an outfit for yourself. And you ask them about the 200 million which was put in Bank of Uganda. They ask you, what is that? So they are working by themselves. So my point, I'm not a banker and I'm not an economist. My point is you need to provide services to these people so that they can comfortably keep their money. And if it's not just a question of financial safety, it's a question of social justice. We need to make them inclusive. I know it sounds like rhetoric, but I also still believe you cannot divest a country out of its economic development. I know we went that path, but it was a wrong path. You cannot expose your economy to others to decide for you. So Professor Muhumuza, the president, is still waiting for a debate on economic models, which are not those ones you're singing. Is there an alternative model?
Dr. Omara,
just let me finish. So
I wanted to schedule an appointment
with the president.
With the president through the PPS.
Okay, yeah, you'll get them around me those ones.
I'm ready for that debate.
For that debate.
Yes.
But basically, I think as scholars on the continent and as people, intellectuals, as people who think as technocrats, we need to rethink. Asia has developed its models. We are stuck in one model, and what are we doing? Playing catch-up. And of course, we can't play catch-up because we even don't have a capitalistic class. We have business people, we have dealers, we have salary owners. That's what we all are, and we talk. So you need to have the economy drive. And that's just one last thing. I know we've talked a lot about UDC, but one thing that enabled the Chira EV to move from an innovation in a university into uptake was because a government was ready to pick it up. None of the foreign investors was going to pick that. And that's why we have all our innovations stopping there. They are displayed, the chancellor comes and ministers and so you've done these things very well. They stop there. Most of these are found at the back of National Council of Science and Technology in weeds. But the point is, if you have your own financial institutions, if you have your own banks, you may not have to call them UCB. But whatever the name, and why is this important? You get people in, and I also don't believe that in this day and era, we should necessarily be focused on brick and mortar branches.
Yeah.
Can we have kiosks?
Yeah.
So that a woman comes from the garden with her horse, she does not even have to wash, goes and transacts and goes.
We already do.
So we don't have, no, you're using a mobile phone, which is very expensive. The transaction costs are very high. But other than that, we can rethink the model. Thank you very much.
To what model?
No, we need to rethink. The experts are here. Let them rethink a model. The president is waiting for a debate on the Karamojong household, on the peasant household. What is the economy, or the economics that run those systems, and how do we grow them? Because actually every country has developed from there. And
I like, Dr. Sarah, that you've covered the ones that are in the rural economy. But let me come to you, Dr. Muhumuza. We have all these digital platforms. I had Professor Suruma talk about, Uganda Commercial Bank, how many branches it had, how he downsized it. But we have the mobile phones. The number of people on mobile money
is very expensive.
Is 3 times the number of people who are banking in banks.
Because the banks have excluded them.
We have cryptocurrency that people are on different platforms. Yeah. There is technology that is coming in every day that can be able to do these things. Help us understand this revival vis-a-vis the technology that is really running faster than it.
Actually, the banks themselves are in this space. The reason the others are more visible and maybe they have made faster progress is not that the banks don't want to and they are not there, but there is regulatory requirements. The cost of regulation in Uganda on the banks is so encumbering. And that's why I was even telling you, if we do not find the 150 billion for the government banks, come June next year, even the 2-3 we have will have a problem surviving in this market. Now, the others are struggling with this. There are a lot of innovation they would want to do, but because you are regulated, and as I've said, to give assurance, you will hear every bank, they finish their advert by saying, regulated by
Bank of
the
Uganda.
Bank of, to want to give that assurance. But that assurance comes at a cost. A number of banks are mobilizing resources. Today you can't lend CASA. CASA is really current and savings accounts, the money they are talking about. No bank can rely on that money to lend it. Because the people are already waiting to say, the moment I receive a message, my salary has gone in, they go and withdraw it. Now, the banks have, if they want to lend, they have to do fixed deposits. Find Sarah here who has finished her research and something and has some 3 million that she's not going to use in the next 6 months.
Okay.
Then they say, can we have a fixed deposit? That is coming at 12%. So if I'm mobilizing money for lending at 12%, what should I lend that money? At what rate? Plus my overhead costs. So there are regulatory costs and requirements. And by the way, sometimes the central bank will say, now we are fighting inflation. So the cash reserve ratio has been increased to 11%. So a bank that has mobilized the 600 billion of depositors' money is being told of that, 80 billion, don't touch it, because we are managing inflation. So there are those costs that you really want to dig into and say, can UCB survive? Can a small bank survive? You begin to see the hassles and struggles. So the description, and I wanted to qualify, she may not be an economist by training, but what she has described is the real economics mixed up with the politics. Why is the model not working for us? We work in a political economy as of today. The Bangladesh she's talking about, that's why Grameen and BRAC are domiciled there. They have different arrangements. BRAC Uganda here does not have a fleet of vehicles like you would see with other banks, like we saw with UCB. But they also have field offices. Their managers travel on a bus. Because they are saying, if we give you that cost, we will have to pass it on to the borrower. Now that's the model. And that's the strategy. If you are going to help poor people, you must cut down your cost of living. I know how Ugandans want to live. Workshops, travels abroad, benchmarking, renting in very expensive places we are paying so much. That's the bank you'll bring. It won't serve the population we are discussing here.
Okay.
But we already have some models to serve them. Now, because Grameen and BRAC went down there, look at where BRAC headquarters is. Kabus. The rest of the other banks, where are they? They are renting here in buildings where they are paying dollars per square meter. Those are the issues you want to look at and say, can a government bank fit in a market environment? And that's why many of them have not even ventured out to use the digital technologies. We have over 10,000, I think it's about 12 or 13,000 agent banks talking about reaching out to the people. The agent banks who have opened up, and I told, thanks to the FID, to pass this law. Thanks to Honorable Kadaga 2016, she really helped us, and Honorable Kasule, to push it through Parliament. Deep in the night, they had to pass that amendment to make sure agent banking comes in and more cash and bank assurance. For the small, downtrodden people. Now you can go to an agent bank and deposit, withdraw, get a statement. You can even do it on your mobile phone. You can do push and pull. You don't have to go to the bank. I don't remember when I was last in the bank. But you can pay everything. So these are available issues that UCB was in its era. They were not there. And that's why they were trying to solve. So I'm like, how do we develop a model? How do we develop a strategy that will still meet this objective, but in a more efficient way that you don't burden the very same people you want to help? And I still hear ideological arguments. You can't develop out of agriculture. Bangladesh in 2022, which we're talking about, its exports of textile and apparels were $42 billion.
Grameen starts much earlier than that.
No, this is the exports because of engaging those smaller peoples, but not pirating on them and subsisting on them. They were able to export 42 billion. Uganda's economy, for the context of our listeners and viewers, is 48 billion. Now, Bangladesh, out of export of one item, did 42 billion. Uganda is doing 4.5. So if you have a good banking system, but it's not just the banking system, because we use supply side, give them money, but to do what? And also, how do you secure their money? Now, some of these banks and lower people, income people, today a friend of mine came and said his wife, the child died in the womb. He had to sell a cow to have that operation done. So it's no longer just the financial sector. If people are going to make money, borrow money, get 2 cows, then you get a sick child, the health system is not working, the education system is not working, you're going to sell that cow for this child to sit in your neighbor. Now you need a comprehensive set, and that's why for me, I still embrace the parish development model, all the 7 pillars. Because what you make on this side, financial inclusion, you are going to lose it on the health system. We are still debating whether interns should be or should not be. People are dying. People are selling their assets that they have built up to save lives. Now, if government had invested adequately well in these other areas, and that's why you'll find that the likes of BRAC and Grameen provide educational loans, they find the philanthropists to fund that because they know this is parasitic on the establishment of putting people up. Every time somebody goes up and gets 5 goats, somebody falls sick, they sell the goats. So they are up and down. So they say, how do we limit the hemorrhage on this financial investment and the business of this person so that it is not pirated and decapitalized by these needs which the households must meet. So that's the model you really want to discuss. The model of households at a very low level is not just provide finances. It's more than that. You must cover them on all the 5 fronts of their lives. All the 4 corners must be watched. In other words, all the 11 players must be on the pitch. Right now, we are all saying, if I can get a striker, it's okay. Or a goalkeeper, it's okay. You need to contextualize it so that you don't just speak to supply side. You want to speak on what business are they going to do. Can this business survive? And that's why the banks today are looking at those risks. As we speak, the survey by Bank of Uganda, from among the banks, already the banks are saying we don't want to lend to real estate because the contractors have become too risky. They are the biggest contributors of non-performing assets, courtesy of government failure to pay them. Their arrears are in the range of 7 trillion. Now, who is killing the banking sector? If you don't pay these private people who have borrowed from the banks, for them to go back and pay their loans, and now they are using their assets. So it's a bigger conversation, and I think that's why Honorable Kivumbi is saying, where is the potential? Is this the key to open it up? If government can behave in this economy, we'll get a lot of mileage. The biggest contribution or reduction on the budget is actually debt management. It's debt management. Refinancing is 8.5 trillion. Interest payment is 6, that's already 14. You haven't touched the external loans, and we are continuing. And you cannot borrow yourself out of debt.
It goes all the way to 21 trillion.
You have to restructure. Now, in that kind of situation, is UCB the low-hanging fruit? Should it be my first leg out there? Why don't I first fix these structural issues that are really even failing the private sector to make progress so that they can support the bank? Okay. Right now, they are a parasite on the banks, and the banks are folding their arms, keeping out from them, only lending to government.
Timothy.
And Honorable Mara, let me come to you. You being a seasoned banker,
yes,
the 2 elements that banks are really considering now are loans and government securities, but also being the risk that we are as citizens to be able to be given loans, it prefers to give the money to the government in securities. Housing finance is in the mortgage business. Centenary Bank is looking at farmers, especially there. What is Uganda Commercial Bank going to look at?
No, thank you very much. Professor Surma told us to stick with the fundamentals, and I will stay there.
I hope we still have them anyway.
Timothy, let me contextualize this debate. The post-1986 economic policies by the new liberal economists like the late Professor Metobile and the team brought into something into the country these terms of liberalization and privatization. It was a very painful exercise which was carried with austerity measures. The austerity measures meant people lost jobs. Professor has talked about it, UCB, and government parastatals. Basically, people were being thrown out. So that process of privatization should never have included certain key strategic sectors.
Exactly.
Like UCB, which I've already mentioned. For example, like UEB, power and energy. We should never have privatized it. A commercial bank, Uganda Railways. We should never collapse it, even the airlines and so forth. Although airlines was not making money, but key strategic areas, we should have kept it. Now, one thing which, the credit which I give to those teams, although they were basically boisterous, but they were very courageous. They took a decision to say, come rain or shine, we are going to privatize. They were great thinkers. They had courage to do reforms. To their credit, no matter of the fact that we later on realized that UCB should never have been privatized, and the president has alluded to that fact. My question today is that, are the economists of today, the leaders of today, thinking so drastically, although the other one was even pushed by the IMF, but are we able to think drastically and say we need, maybe at this stage in our history, to again look at a policy reversal? We need to do a policy reversal. For example, government is now very progressively working towards supporting private sector. Like the way I've mentioned, you find, ROCO is being supported, certain entities are being supported without a clear policy. So have we reversed? I think you asked that question. Has there been a policy reversal? And that policy reversal should, because now, like Uganda Airlines, we have gone back and put it back. Now, can't we put back UCB? And my question is yes. And this is my proposition, and I'm very strong about it. A country that has lost confidence in itself and its ability to mobilize domestic resources and own a financial institution where the citizenry can go and access money. And what you're talking about the mobile money and whatever, those are now infrastructures and capabilities. But the fundamental thing which I'm talking about is, how have we failed to come together to mobilize resources and start a bank? And government can do it on our behalf. We are the taxpayers.
Honorable Mara,
yes.
What would be its value proposition to this economy?
Yes, I'm coming to that. If you look at what is happening within the economy, recently we, as a committee of finance and I think national economy, when we were considering a lot, there was a briefcase company that was
Amarogo.
What's it called? Amarogo. From Nairobi, a briefcase company which asked as a government of Uganda and to the level of the presidency for them to do a lead arranger for us to secure 500 million euros.
In Ubunyora, I would call them Amarogo. Which doctors?
Which doctors? Now, that is how far we have gone.
Yeah.
Relying on Amarogo, a company that is basically can only arrange $5 million. Now we have given them to look for 500 million euros. So the value proposition would be, let the citizenry, I will give an example like NSSF. We have been saving, NSSF now has almost coming to 20 trillion shillings. These are small savers that have put their money together. And the debate which we will have next time is how we can use that money to do strategic investment for the country. Now, in the case of UCB, government can invest this money on our behalf. As citizenry, we will put our money there. So if at a particular point government really wants to borrow money domestically through treasury bills or bonds, it is our money the government is borrowing. The interest that government is paying comes back to us. Now, these neoliberal economists who came and did these structural adjustment programs and so forth, their fundamental belief was that if you liberalize, one of the things is that you take away state influence in the management of the economy, eliminate price controls, And then the market forces will determine interest rates, and the rates will be very low. Interest rate, the cost of borrowing money will be very low. And Professor, you agree with me on that?
Yes.
But what happened? The rates today is 19, 20, 21%.
24.
24. The rates have never come down, Professor.
More than double inflation.
More than double inflation. Yeah. But UCB, the days of UCB, the rates were relatively affordable. So as a nation, we can determine, since UCB will be the biggest bank in the country, because now, Professor, if you look at the deposit base of these banks, it's basically government money. Because government bank with them, we put our monies there, and we go back and borrow our own money. It is in a country where people are thinking is when you can have this kind of thinking. Now, you put your money in these foreign-owned banks, your government is broke, they come through the treasury, through Bank of Uganda, treasury bills and bonds, and you borrow your own money and pay them interest and they externalize it. Yeah. So the value proposition would be retaining our money here, domestically, owning the bank, the profit comes back to us, and then as nationalists, every person outside there, when they know there's a UCB there, UCB bank there, they will bank with it. And now, coming into issue of bringing in technology, we can now build capabilities where people now, through, let me say, bank to wallet, we bring a wallet system where banking will be on the phones. Our villagers will be using their phones. I was in Otuke yesterday, and I was discussing these matters with the SACCO people. And what they told me is that the government is building a PDM system, but it's not yet integrated into the bank or banking system. Yeah. So this one is hanging alone, the bank or banking system is here. So if you integrate the PDM system to UCB, bingo, which means the bank, any transaction that takes place here on a PDA platform is recognized here. And all our citizenry around the country would be transacting on a system that is integrated. Okay. And therefore, fundamentally, the deposits, what makes a bank is deposit. It's not that the paid up capital that is talking about, the 150 billion. The paid capital will sit there. But what you are going to lend money from is now the deposits. And the deposits is actually the citizenry's money, which will come to Uganda Commercial Bank. Let me close like this on this subject, that me, Paul O'Mara, have decided that I am going to move a private member's bill. And I've already talked to the Secretary to the Treasury, PSST, my good friend Gobi, that we can work together with him and Minister of Finance. And we look at this thing because Article 173 or 193, 95, which does not allow private members to bring in a bill which will have an effect on the consolidated fund. Yeah. So I will have a conversation with him and say, my brother, here is the data, this is the bill, let's work it on together and get this bank up by tomorrow.
And that's why I'll wait for you from.
Yeah, so that is what I am going to prepare data, and I think this conversation will take it to the level of the presidency. I think the president needs facts.
Yes.
And many people have stopped thinking, and maybe thinking alone, but we really need to provide data and the reasoning behind it and what it will do for the country. And we cannot now rely on foreign-owned banks and then run around with the Amarok. Then we go to Exim Bank. Honorable Mangachivumbi, Exim Bank is a Chinese bank.
Exactly.
Ex what? Exim, I think it's Exim.
Exim, and then there's a Afro Exim Bank, but they're all Chinese.
Yeah, so now this is a foreign bank in China put together by Chinese. And then we now rely on them for every development agenda. But we can create our own here.
Let me bring in Honorable Chivumbi. Honorable Chivumbi, you're already hearing a private member's bill is coming to the House there.
I'll provide the facts.
And now the is going to provide the facts.
The president needs evidence. He will bring his, I'll bring mine.
Yes, yes.
And the president will say
let me come to you.
I'm willing to have that discussion.
Gentlemen, let me come to Honorable Chivumbi. What framework needs to be around this?
First of all,
and how does it translate to an ordinary Uganda?
You cannot downplay one, the importance of having an indigenous
bank. Yes.
Yeah. Let's be factual. Let's simply say there's nothing as useful. Me, I normally tell I don't bank with any bank where I cannot walk to a manager. And on face value, the manager may trust me.
Yeah.
And do you know what difference it makes? Even if you are in commercial trading, you walk to a manager, say, have aged my oil, okay? I need 1 billion shilling, okay? It is on a flight, it's coming, give me the money. Now, if you have a local bank, you definitely have to do it.
Yeah.
All the people are colonizing us. Okay, for example, when the British came here, they came along with the bank.
Yes.
When the Indians came here,
They came with a bank.
they came with the bank.
The
What's the
Chinese.
purpose?
When the Chinese have come here,
They come with a
they've
bank.
come
with
with
a
a
bank.
bank.
Yes.
So that means we locally need to own a bank.
Correct.
That's
And we need to own our own financial institution. Me, my big question
Yes.
is how to do it.
Yes.
Must the government do it? Or government must support people? It's on, you see, this thing like, it's
Yes.
on the government.
Yes. Yes.
Government, if we find Dr. Suruma, with the Dr. Mara, with the Dr. Mum, with the doctors here, okay? We say, please, I've always argued, if you empower our people to
Yes.
start a road construction,
Yes.
how can potholes be filled by a Chinese? You see, the way you are running your economy,
Yes.
potholes in Kampala here
You're right.
are being filled by Chinese.
You're right.
They go dig maram here, fill it here.
You pay.
and
You pay.
But because you have not paid your own contractors.
No, I'm
arrears. So they have collapsed.
So the question is, must government own it, or must government support that endeavor? The two are different, completely different. That's why for me I'm saying you must look for a clear strategy. Is government going to enter into enterprise management? Will it be an effective organ to run a corporate body that is up to speed, up to date? My question is, the government, the way I know it now, does not have that discipline. And I can disqualify it. Therefore, you need to have a big, Omara, you need to have a big thinking around what you need to do. But the intention is clear.
Yes.
When you go to Ethiopia, before they go to these problems, we who were in Ethiopia in the previous parliament, up to now, they are holding on to their banking sector.
The government owns one of the banks.
Yes.
Okay? They are hanging on to their telecommunication.
Yes.
They're hanging on to their energy. And it's their army that is building most infrastructure
Correct.
in Ethiopia.
Yes.
And they've done a fantastic job. Now, but if you are going to do that, when I went to meet the Ethiopians in those Matek industries, these fellows were driving scooters.
Yes.
Okay? They were not your type here.
Yes.
Who want to drive a 4,000 cc and one drives from Korolo. So,
and with the lead car in front and behind.
With the lead car in front. And when you travel on all our flights,
yes,
the business class and the first class is filled by people on consolidated fund. Now, the other day I met Mandela,
yes,
on a flight. Mandela, you know him, the way you know Mandela. And I will not tell you who are sitting in the first class.
Yes.
Mandela was sitting in a business class. Yes. But some poor Ugandans working for governments were in first class. Mandela is in a business class, and business, the lower business, not the upper business.
Yes.
Mandela was in the upper business. So, do you have that discipline in your own civil servants to be that? So are you going to have people to run it? So for me, the necessity to do it is undebatable.
Yeah.
We don't have to debate it.
Thank you.
Now, I was telling Professor here, from Mpiji, Muhammad, you've gone there now, from Mpiji, that's where you have Centenary, Stanbic Bank, 2 banks.
Yes.
But you drive all the way from PG, you drive to Butambala, to Gomba, to Sembabule. If you now use that road,
Yes.
which they have opened, not a single
bank,
not a single bank, not a single ATM.
Yeah.
Okay? And a few scattered mobile now agent banking that are coming up. So therefore, if we are going to develop a social mobilization, now I'll give you an example. I have a friend, very fun example. This boy in my constituency used to, these who tout cars, so would make his money. So he would go in the evening and he digs a hole. He places his money there and he defecates on it.
so that nobody can touch it.
No, even when you come and you're digging, you will find you think he was come to defecate. So you don't see what is below.
But I hope it did get to the money.
So that's why he used to keep his money. So for him, after collecting every evening, he goes and digs a hole, puts his money there, he defecates on it. Says, no, now, if you are going to have that money in that very evening, in Buatu where I stay, there are 2 amazing things I've seen. There are women who sell matoke, okay? But next to the mobile money person. Now, the 2 are my friends. So the moment the day is closing, this woman takes all her money to the mobile money. Yeah. She will pick what she needs for it and doesn't sleep with it. So do you need to mobilize that resource into a formal structure? And it can give you a big advantage. My big question, which I want to question, to put across, is that you have to think through whether a government-owned bank is the best way to go around it, or a private partnership. And with indigenous Ugandans, and you've got to study, how did we lose then Greenland Bank? How did we lose Tefe? How did we lose corporate? So, and then you address those other issues. You can't be naive about them. Then you go to the hardcore issues to unlock the economy, which for me are more critical.
Those are the fundamentals.
Yes, the doctor talked about. Then you go to the hardcore economy. Is that if I supply government and I've borrowed money from UCB, when you open it, will government pay you? Now, if government is sitting, you just imagine, if government is sitting on a debt rollover of 9 trillion, debt rollover, that means this money should have been paid back to these financial institutions.
Yes.
You hold on to it, okay? It's no longer in production because you took it and spent it. But you are paying is it going to be now about 3 trillion in interest? And so if I addressed that, I have more money saved than the 1 trillion they push in the partial development model. That's why you have a problem. So for me, if you address those other issues, then you can fix this. So to unlock our economy requires fundamentally not only a return, not just UCB, a return of an indigenous financial infrastructure as it wants it. It requires a whole holistic rethink about how we run government, how we run finances, how we go about, and it's something that you can do. You remember?
Can I provide some information?
No,
to you?
before I provide, I'd put a proposal, Doctor. You can imagine, 5 years ago, okay? 5 years ago, our debt refinancing, 5 years ago, was about 2 trillion to 3 trillion. We've grown it with raising revenue. You have more raising revenue, you have a growing debt rollover. And 2 years ago, I went to Parliament. I said, can we fix expenditure? That is post-COVID, to post-COVID expenditure. Stay at a standstill there. Just give yourself a space of 3 years and weed out this debt rollover. You will unlock this economy by a net 3 to 4 trillion, which you are paying in
Interest
debt
rate.
refinancing. It takes only 3 years to solve that problems. It takes only 2 years of financial discipline to pay all these other areas. 2 years, you can pay them. You can pay them, and you have cleared them out. But what our friends are doing, who are running finances, is that they are thinking that the best way to get out of debt is to borrow.
Yeah.
That's what they are saying. The best way to solve any problem is to borrow.
Okay.
Everything for them.
Honorable Chivumbi, we are running out of time. Let me bring in Professor Suruma there. Professor, assuming all things are constant and this commercial bank is revived, it is handed to you, what strategies would you employ and how would it survive? Especially looking at what Honorable Chivumbi has spoken about, what Dr. Muhumza has spoken about, how would you do this?
Okay, first of all, I would like to make it clear what the problem is. We always should define a problem before we try to solve it. Yeah. The problem is not in the name, Uganda Commercial Bank. That's not the problem. The problem is maximizing the capital for the country, the savings, which we can use as a country, both in the private sector and in the public sector. Using our own, making sure that our own resources are properly organized, so that if all this money that is in the hole and so on is put in a financial institution that we have access to, that is ours, then we have resources both in the private sector and in the public sector that is currently scattered and inaccessible, and therefore we cannot use it. That's very, very important.
Correct.
Secondly, so it's not about UCB. It's about whether we can have institutions throughout the country that people can access. I shouldn't have to walk 10 kilometers in order to put money in a bank.
No.
That's a waste of national resources itself.
Yes.
There should be a bank nearby as infrastructure. Very, very important. So, whether you call it cooperative bank or commercial bank or national bank for development, the important thing is that we create an institution which will enable all our people to have access, just as we want them to have access to health and education, we also need them to have access to financial services. Now, whether it will be publicly owned or privately owned, I think I can answer this question well, because when we were under pressure to privatize Uganda Commercial Bank, the Reaganomics,
Reaganomics there.
And Thatcherism.
People on the right, far right, who say that everything government is bad, and everything private is good. That was the time.
The new classicals.
So everything government was bad, so it had to be privatized or liquidated. We resisted and failed because the ideology which was controlling the world was against us. So now we have to be pragmatic.
Yes.
The Chinese, they are now have, I think, the 4 largest banks in the world.
Yes.
As government banks.
Yes.
So the theory that government banks cannot work is rubbish, is nonsense.
Correct. Professor?
The largest banks in the world are not private. They are not capital.
It's ideology of the Chinese.
They are banks. They are owned by banks.
Yeah.
We can learn from them.
Yes.
I went to the manager of China Agricultural Bank in 2007. He told me we have 32,000 branches of just that one bank, Agricultural Bank of China.
Yes.
I said, how do you manage 32,000 branches? He said, technology.
Yes.
So, Uganda, we only have 10,000 parishes, 10,594.
Yes.
Having a bank which has a branch in every parish,
yes,
we can learn from others how to do it.
Yes.
We can use technology.
There are 700.
And there is no reason why You and I cannot buy shares in this bank. It doesn't have to be 100% government owned, isn't it?
Yes.
We are only saying government to come in because the theory was that after privatizing, these private banks would now go all over the country, everywhere. That was the theory. When I became my finance minister in 2005, I said, where are the branches?
They were closing the branches.
They are closing the branches.
Exactly.
They are nowhere. Our people are as they have no, as it was in the beginning, is now. They have no access to financial services. Why should we tolerate this any longer?
We shouldn't.
We shouldn't.
And I will volunteer to go and run it, Professor.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
I'll come with you.
Yes.
So,
and you run out of parliament.
It's a question of what is pragmatic.
Yes.
What is possible. My argument all along in Uganda Commercial Bank was sell it to Ugandans.
Yes.
I didn't say don't privatize. I said privatize, but privatize to us, not foreigners, so that the bank will remain ours. I know how difficult it is to access a foreigner and explain to him what's going on in my village. He doesn't understand, he doesn't have time for it.
And it doesn't make good
You
economics
put
for
the
him.
money in the treasury bills,
The treasury bills.
18.5% while he's at the beach.
Where doctor wants, the doctor is interested. That's what is economics.
Okay. I'm going to start with Honorable Chivumbi, then Honorable Mara, Dr. Muhumza, then finally Professor Sarah.
I am concluding.
As you conclude.
As I conclude. So the unlocking of economic potential requires capital. We don't have the capital now. We need to increase our capital. And that should be done through having national institutions that are reaching all our citizens so that they can save, and our savings is what we call capital. And that is urgent. That should have been done yesterday. Don't call it Uganda Commercial Bank because you create unnecessary wars. The people who are involved, like myself, will say what's going on. Call it any other name. Call it cooperative bank, as long as it brings regulated, trusted financial services to the people of Uganda, that is what we need.
Shall call it a national bank. Honorable Chivumbi,
Honorable
Mara.
have some.
First of all,
your concluding remarks.
Yes, my concluding remarks. You see, Professor here assumes that trust levels in government are high. Trust levels in our governments are not that extremely.
I said it doesn't have to be government.
Yes, but you said, you see, you have to address those other psychological problems. And in the social contract, which people want to, and psychological contract, which people feel so strongly about. So that is one other assumption that you need to correct. The other thing is, you need, those of you who are interested in this, you need to define in a modern way what a banker branch is. It doesn't need to be the traditional way. In the modern way, what would constitute a peasant to walk into a room with a safe, with an askari to deposit his money, and later on that money is wired for whatever to a main branch? It is as simple as that. So you, as open as you've said in the parishes, you don't need to do it the other way where you have so many secretaries, so many big infrastructure. So you need to rethink exactly what, as you've said, what you want to do with this bank and how it will look like. If you want to make it look like the traditional modern bank, you know it may not work. So my own humble view is that you need to redefine exactly. But secondly, you cannot escape the big question, and you seem to be scattering around. What is the role of government in the economy? How is the leg of the government in this playing field must be? And we need to take a very deliberate, if you want to go the Chinese model, orient yourself that way.
And shoot the corrupt.
And train people that way.
Okay.
Now, if you don't answer those other fundamental, you are neither here or there, you are not going to survive. you are not going to have the liquidity discipline. Therefore, for me, my question is, as you revitalize all these institutions that you want, Mr. Omara, a strong advocate of people's owned bank,
yes,
you've got to answer a big question.
Yeah.
Can our government effectively run business? Because I want you to run a new bank as a business.
We need to leave it there. Honorable Omara, your concluding remark.
Thank
Please
you.
ask the teams there to prepare my last slide.
Okay. The producer has heard. Honorable Omara.
Thank you, Timothy and viewers. I want to appreciate Professor Suruma because he's an encyclopedia of knowledge and history and banking and economics. His concluding remarks, let it stay with us, that as a country, we must own something, a bank of whatever name it is, so that there is self-determination. We can decide on what, for example, PDM, the interest rate we just decided that it's going to be 6%, and there it is. No bank, no foreign-owned bank can go to our villages, to our parishes, and distribute that kind of money. They will never make that decision. Now, if we can do it ourselves, now Post Bank is doing it with Centenary Bank.
And DFCU.
And what?
DFCU.
And DFCU. Now, so we can mobilize these resources where if government needs money for public services and for private sector, we have that bank which we own. And therefore, I'm requesting my colleagues, members of parliament, that something is coming from me regarding the reestablishment of a national commercial bank, which actually should be our pride and should be a basis on which we can coalesce and mobilize resources for our own destiny.
Okay.
So that we can stop relying on foreigners to come and assist us.
Over to Dr. Fred Muhumza.
Yeah, I hope my slide is ready. I just wanted to just end with the realities the people want to address. There are two pieces people need to read: the poor and their money. There is that piece of research out there, and then portfolios of the poor. I talked about an individual whose wife had a child die in the womb and needed that operation last night. This fellow had to call home in the village. The cow was sold in the night. The money was loaded on a phone and sent to him, and the operation went on. The traditional bank you are talking about here would not have facilitated that process. The poor are so fragile that one of the issues is they need to be as close to their money. And that's why I'm saying leveraging technologies is critical.
True.
So we cannot begin to say we must get closer to them. And we work really with Professor Suruma to build the circles. Now the circles are out there and working. Don't think they are not. And now some of the banks are actually leveraging those circles. Now that slide shows you the government borrowing. And you can see from 2013 how the government has ramped up the borrowing. Much as the banks have tried to really bring down the cost of borrowing, if government still has that appetite for money, it is literally distorting. And now it is even saying, poor people, you can also invest in government bonds. And the worst part of it is any government bond of 10%, 10 years and above, is taxed at 10%. There is no poor person who will get an opportunity in a government bond. Now, when I set up a factory where I can employ the people and even help the poor people we are trying to finance, to get an opportunity to work in my factory, or at least either as a small business feeding into it, you are going to be taxed 30%. Yet when I get my billions and put them in a government bond, I will be taxed 10%. So already our own decisions as government, and these are the incentives, are working against the very people who want finance. And that is the route any national bank that is looking down there without reorienting the bigger picture of what incentives government is creating will go down with those individuals, because they will not have the money, they will not have the opportunities. So we're having a lot of imagination. 8.3 million Ugandans don't earn 3,700 shillings a day. Which money are we talking about? This is what they have to buy their food on, parent, and every other thing. So we are still not appreciating. We are still in the UCB era of the late Mwine, who said, I will open branches so that people can bring the money. We assume that money is there. It is there, but not for saving. It is for solving day-to-day problems. Until we resolve the issue of empowering communities to have viable businesses,
then where's the money for
a national bank will have a problem.
Where's the money circle?
Okay, lastly,
Doctor,
Professor
it's too
Sarah.
much of a theorist.
No, it's not. It's the reality on the ground.
Honorable
The good thing we have
Dr.
agreed. You
Mumza.
go through Parliament, I'll also go through my route. We meet at the presidency.
Professor Sarah, over to you.
He has never run a bank, so this
No,
is
I run a bank, by the way, I sit on the board of a bank.
no. On the board, yes, but
Gentlemen,
you haven't run
let's
it.
give the lady a chance.
And it's one of the strongest.
Dr. Mumza, let's give Professor Sarah an opportunity.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy about this conversation because for once time has passed and has vindicated the critiques of neoliberalism who were there in the 1990s. With Honorable Mara, when we were at university, you remember these
Yes.
theories were being critiqued.
Yes.
And the professors who were at the front line of those were castigated for being armchair generals
Yes.
who had never managed an economy. 30 years later, we are proving that they were right, that this was not the thing. So this is a call on us who either we think we are thinkers or politicians to try and imagine models that work for this society and ideologies. The other thing is, I like the debate which is taking place, and I would like to insist, when all the economics has been explained and banking theories, it is about social justice, it is about financial inclusion. You cannot have an economy where more than 80% of your people are not included, and you think that, okay. And that also means, as people have said before, the poor need to be empowered to become bankable. The poor should not be just targeted for exploitation, because that's what is happening with people who are going to the rural areas. You stake your land, you put in your NIN. If you don't repay that money within a week, your land goes, your NIN cannot be returned. So that is a problem. The other thing is our financial institutions need to stop problematizing the poor. The attitude we have as economists is to always think the poor, the rural people, they just have a certain mindset, which is a burden.
And they should
So
remain
we
poor.
should stop perceiving these people as a burden and see how actually can we cultivate them as useful people, because they're already actually useful people. They're running their homes without our support. So how do we understand them? How do we empower them? And I'm imagining that whichever financial or banking model we take, it's not going to stop at taking people's revenues, deposits, but they're also going to give out financial information and financial literacy. And I think also I cannot conclude without saying something about the BOU regulation. He has explained very well. We don't want our local banks and our local initiatives to be taxed out of existence. And there are concerns about the cash reserve that is required. I think it was increased to 2%, and that's going to require a lot of money.
It's more.
It's more than that. So as we are talking, and maybe government and parliament take this route, Bank of Uganda has to be on board. If it's just strict regulation and taking out the local banks, that will not work. But bottom line, social justice, financial inclusion, let's bring our people in. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me read some of the feedback that has come through. Edward from Kasese says, a critical subject by the eminent persons there. Hope the decision is to dissolve the former commercial bank wasn't panicky. Yes, the revival shouldn't also be panicky, but must be informed by facts, and I trust that the panelists have advised. Thank you very much, Edward. Someone else says we should scrap PDM and all these help programs and put them in the national bank, okay? Someone else goes on to say commercial banks are not the solution. We need to localize Uganda and the standard of living. Someone from Toro says, Honorable Mara qualifies to be the finance minister, and Dr. Mhumza seems to be a good economist in a lecture room, but is helping Ugandans how to develop a negative attitude. Joel Walter says, kudos to the Professor Sarah there for paying attention to the question of the rural economy. The PDM is not a promised model for the rural people. It is a one shoe that doesn't fit all. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Okay. Someone lastly says, my name is Samson. I want to thank the panelists all the way from Dr. Suruma to Professor Sarah for everything they have said. The incompetence of running government institutions is the most important thing that is killing the systems. Finally.
You could have ended there. Just in case the next one dilutes it.
The next one says, good evening, Timothy. Thank you for the panelists. I do not support the idea of reviving the commercial bank. Like Dr. Surma said, Ugandans demonstrate strong appetite for saving, especially if their own institutions, like UCB, are a typical example. Secondly, the mobile money businesses. Each of the Ugandans is operating one and saving money there. Lastly, government was borrowing from its own local banks for defense, where the high interests were, and it caused crowding in the market with government projects. This is not a good idea. Okay. I want to say thank you to Professor Sarah, thank you very much. Dr. Fred Muhumza, thank you very much. Honorable Mara Paul, thank you very much.
Yes.
Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi Muhammad, thank you very much. And Professor Dr. Ezra Surma, thank you very much. To the production team and all of us that are here, we really appreciate. We'll end with this quote from Warren Buffett that says, "Never test the depth of a river with both feet." Good morning.
Thank you.
UBC, inspiring Uganda. This weekend on UBC.
The Ugandan fashion industry has big economic prospects, of course, with Gwiza paving the way.
Indigenous designers emerging on the scene are offering